Welcome to First Alarm Family First. I'm Jen Herrera, as always, alongside Carolyn Acosta. And it's been a while, so we are very happy to have all of you with us today.
We are honored to have Major Melissa Barosela with us. She's a 28-year veteran of Miami-Dade Police Department, or Sheriff's Office, I believe it's called now. Major Barosela currently serves as head of Mental Health and Wellness Bureau, overseeing critical programs like the Crisis Response Unit and the Psychological Service Section. We're super excited to have you here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. So what inspired you to combine law enforcement and mental health, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, it actually was never anything that I had planned or intended. I went to school. I went to University of Florida, where I studied psychology. That was actually always my path, was to continue in my doctoral degree in psychology. But being a family member, daughter of a police officer, and while it was never encouraged or really even talked about much in my household, I, again, grew up kind of seeing that world. And so towards the end of my college career, I decided to do some ride-along with some officers, both in Alachua County Sheriff's Office and with Miami-Dade Sheriff's Office. When I'd be on break, I'd come down here and do the same, and just decided that was going to be my career path. So I started the academy after graduating from UF.
I think it's interesting, and I love talking about the generational aspect of first responders because we do see it a lot. My father was a firefighter. My sisters nor I, none of us ever wanted to be firefighters or go into that field. I'm curious, and I know that you said it was never talked about or mentioned, but was there something, watching your dad do something over the years or serving the community in a certain kind of way, was there something now looking back that you realize may have motivated you in the end to go that route?
Sure. I would go to certain functions. We had like the Pig Bowl back then, that football game between, the different agencies. I would go to his office every so often. And so I think just kind of seeing even the camaraderie and the brotherhood definitely inspired me. And I was always into just more that social service aspect and of psychology, right? And so I think definitely was encouraged by just his own work ethic and his enjoyment of the profession.
It's a fun community to be a part of.
Yes.
Yeah.
Over the years, have you seen the attitudes change towards mental health in the law enforcement?
Absolutely. I think we still have a long way to go, but I definitely have seen a huge cultural shift, a paradigm shift within law enforcement mental health. I know when I started, 28 years ago, even my own training officers would say, you never want to go to psych services. That is not where you want to end up. It was seen as maybe something that was, more punitive or a last resort type of thing. And over the years, again, I've been now with that unit for 17 years, I've definitely seen a more openness, more conversations about it, definitely a reduction in stigma, and many more people accessing services. I mean, it's tripled just in the past 5 years or so, the volume of clients coming into the office.
What do you think, Major, that you guys are doing at Miami-Dade Sheriff's Office that is allowing for that to happen? Because there are a lot of other agencies, whether it's police or fire, who have the services, but the employees aren't taking advantage of it. So what do you think you guys are doing right that's making it popular and an okay choice for everybody?
Yeah, so what we started doing probably about 10 years ago or so is really being more proactive, much more training, letting the officers see the clinicians, get to know the clinicians, offer different types of training courses that are voluntary, elective kind of courses that people could take based on whatever they may be interested in. We do a lot of outreach. We visit the different stations, the different bureaus. We'll do very specific workshops for, let's say, our homicide investigators or our special victims investigators, our internet crimes against children investigators. So just being more present, more accessible, I think goes a long way. And so it's almost like we are like a household name, so to speak, with our personnel. We start from the academy. We do training for them, both at the beginning of the academy and at the end of their academy experience. The trainees come and visit our office. So they kind of demystifies what that looks like. They see that it's not a scary place, very welcoming, which has definitely helped. We also go to when they have a family night at the beginning of their academy experience where they are welcoming their family. Their family has to, shows up. And so we let the family know about our unit. We give them our phone number, a brochure with all the information, because who better to be able to have that resource, right? They're the ones that are going to notice when their family member is not doing so well, maybe a few years down the road. And so we always tell them, save it on your phone, stick it in your junk, the brochure in your junk drawer. Hopefully you never need to use it, but they know that we exist. And so that has really been helpful as well. Plus we go to any critical incident. So the death of a child, let's say, or a prolonged rescue efforts, an officer involved shooting, something like anything of that nature, we will respond and debrief the officers and follow up with them as well.
That's good. What advice would you give a new officer starting as far as taking care of his mental health?
Yes. When throughout the entire academy, they're focusing so much on their physical health and everything that's designed to protect them from the physical dangers of the job. They're focusing on defensive tactics and the driving and, all the firearms training, which is very important. But then we remind them that really the leading cause of death for our law enforcement officers year after year is suicide. It's not, everything else that combined still suicides outnumber all of that year after year. And so we really kind of remind them of that factor and how important it is to prioritize their mental health starting from the beginning of their careers.
So these are recruits that we're talking about at this point. That kind of knowledge and reminder with current officers, is that brought up in any sort of regular training?
Yes, every month we shoot out emails to the entire department with depending on the topic. The topic of the month is dependent upon New Year. Like now it's more about goals and goal setting and that type of thing. But we will send that out every month again with a reminder, our phone number, where we're at. We also have a wellness app that all of our recruits download, and we also had a whole campaign to get our in-service personnel to download it as well. And there's so many resources on this app, plus all of our contact information, not just for our clinicians, but also for our peer support team and our chaplains.
Would you say there's any early signs that you would say maybe families should look out for if they feel like their first responder is maybe going through something?
Sure. I mean, obviously, if immediately after an event, you're going to maybe notice some typical normal signs of that acute stress. However, if it's persisting, right, if you notice changes in behaviors, right, maybe isolating a little bit more, withdrawing a little bit more, not participating in activities that they normally, every Friday they're going to play golf or they go fishing, and then you notice that that's starting to change. We see a lot of those little signs before we actually see the more significant symptoms.
I want to touch on this because, we've learned so much having these conversations with different guests on the show. And when there's a critical incident, let's take Surfside, for instance. Obviously, there are people on site. I know that you were on site for police officers as well as firefighters who were on the scene. Those days, right, you're seeing things, you're hearing things, you're smelling things, you're working, there's adrenaline involved. So the mental effects may not hit somebody for 6 months, a year, 2 years later. Is there any sort of check-in process? Because I feel like you guys have really set an amazing standard when it comes to helping with the mental health of first responders, specifically Miami-Dade Sheriff's Office. The programs, the amount of people that you have in place is incredibly impressive and quite refreshing, to be completely honest with you. So how do is there a way, because I know we all process things differently, but is there that check-in process 6 months, a year, 2 years later?
Yes, we absolutely do check in with our officers, not just, a couple weeks after an incident, but 6 months and a year after as well. So, because you're absolutely right. You might not see those signs and symptoms right away.
Yeah, we've heard a few stories where somebody will be on a call and they've never had any sort of, mental health episode. And I don't know if that's the right way to put it in the past, but something will trigger them and remind them. We see that a lot in veterans. And so maybe they're police officers now, but if they were a veteran and a certain sound can take them back to a certain place.
Absolutely. Right.
Has there been anything that you can recall, Major, that had an impact on you, and maybe not to the level of other people that it sticks with you. Yeah.
Sure. There was a infant death that I responded to. It was a newborn that was with his umbilical cord still attached, and I guess the mother threw him in a canal. So responding to that, and my sons were little at the time too. So it wasn't even so much the actual child, the visual image. It's more thinking like, how can a mom do this to their child? Right. So I think it's more the sometimes emotional component of it that really gets to our first responders.
And if somebody that is in law enforcement and is going through their struggles and stuff, and they want to seek help, how do they go about it? Do they reach out to your office? How would you direct them?
Yes, absolutely. They can reach out to our office. It is confidential. All of our clinicians are licensed by the state of Florida, so they are bound by confidentiality that supersedes any, administrative policy or anything of that nature. So it is confidential. We are off-site, which is also really great, to really maximize that confidentiality. And so, yes, we are on call 24/7. So again, regardless of the time of day, we are available.
And I know that you guys have sworn clinicians, meaning police officer clinicians, right? And then civilian clinicians. And I think that that's important and worth noting because it gives people an option. Do they want somebody who may have seen the exact same things that they have seen, or do they want somebody who kind of is neutral? Is there a preference? Have you seen a preference, or is it kind of like a 50-50 split?
Yeah, I think most people will say they don't really have a preference. They just want somebody that they can connect with. And so, we have that, male, female, sworn, civilian. And then our peer support team is also made up with really well-trained, both sworn and civilian. We have dispatchers and our administrative staff that are also part of our support team, our peer support team. So it really allows us to connect with everybody throughout the department, regardless of their classification, their rank, their gender.
Do you find that more people seek out female clinicians? I could be totally stereotyping. I'm just curious. I know we've worked with Emily Gould with the First Resiliency Foundation, and she's fantastic. And every time Carolyn and I leave her, we're just like, oh, she just made us feel so much better. Her voice is calming. Her demeanor is calming. I'm getting the same exact vibe from you. Yes. Maybe it's because I'm a woman, so I would want to talk to a woman. Do you see that?
It's a female-dominated profession, and so I think, just by default, obviously the females are going to be more requested. But we get kind of both. There's some people that really are thrilled to see that we have male clinicians as well. Yeah, and sure. So, but I think if there is a request, it's typically for a female.
That's nice.
We mentioned that your dad, an officer, your husband is an officer. I don't know that we talked about that. And your son is also an officer. So putting on your mom hat, forget the major hat, putting on your mom hat, when your son comes to you and says, I want to be a police officer, not that you haven't had an amazing career, but knowing the things that you've seen and the things that you've experienced and your specialty, was there a little part of you that it was like, oh, are you sure you want to do this? Yeah,
I discouraged it. While he was in college, I just kept telling him, just wait until after you graduate. We'll talk about it then, just to buy him some more time, hope that maybe he would change his mind. Right. He actually wanted to was considering the fire service as well, and applied to both police and fire departments. Again, I was more encouraging the fire side. But at some point, he said, this is what I want to do, Mom, and so I wasn't thrilled about it, right? Just more because of the worry, what I've seen. But the same way my dad didn't discourage me, I just told him that this is what you want to do, and I had a conversation with my dad in heaven and said, you better watch his back. And here he is. He's doing great.
How many years has he been on?
He has been on almost 5 years now.
Okay. I have a 17-year-old, so when she started driving, I was married to Life 360, even if she was going just down the street, right? Yes, just watching the entire time. When he first started working, his first day out on the street, can you kind of take us back to that day again, wearing your mom hat?
Yeah, he was on midnight shift, and I was listening to the radio the whole time. Yeah. And eventually, it stopped. I eventually stopped worrying so much. I know that obviously just because of the role that I have here, if God forbid something were to happen, I would find out. And so I really at that point, told myself I can't just live my life and worry of my son, and really just have to have faith and know that he was trained well, and that he'll be okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what advice did you give him? Like, as far as taking care of himself, like just mentally and physically and stuff like that.
Yeah, I definitely am on top of him with that, like a typical mom. But yeah, I'm more mindful. I try not to give him so much advice, but more just watch that he is, taking care of himself the best he can, getting sleep, taking part in activities and, self-care, that he's, going fishing and hunting and all the things that he likes to do. And so I just more mindful of any changes in his behaviors.
Yeah.
You mentioned the term compassion fatigue before we went on. How do you take care of yourself? Because compassion fatigue is a real thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think our team, we really practice what we preach, and we really have each other. Fortunately, because we have such a robust team in our office, we, we'll just sit together at the conference table and talk a little bit of, about our different experiences and how we're doing. And we do informal check-ins with each other quite often. But again, definitely try to practice what I preach as far as, that self-care and, sleep, healthy eating, and all of that as well.
Is it more common for officers on the midnight shift to suffer from mental illness or to contact your office? I mean, I don't want to obviously disclose anything specific, but is there a commonality there with people who are on that shift?
Not necessarily. I don't think we would necessarily see more of our midnight shift personnel coming in, but certainly that the sleep deprivation and, the sleep challenges can, impact their own resilience, so I think it's definitely, I know personally, I could not have imagined a career on midnights. I know a lot of officers love it, but I, did it a few months here and there, and it was brutal. But I could definitely empathize with our officers that have to struggle with that, the sleep deprivation, but
It's definitely brutal.
Now, can family members also seek you guys for help with therapy or clinicians?
So we offer our couples counseling. So in that regard, yes, our officers or our civilian personnel as well, our professional staff can also come in for couples therapy with their MDSO spouse or counterpart, but because of just the volume of our own personnel that are coming in, unfortunately, we don't extend it to the extended family. But as part of couples or family counseling, absolutely.
I think that's hugely important. We actually had a man named Doug White on our show not too long ago, and he's an officer, or was an officer, he's retired now, over on the west coast of Florida. He wrote a book, what was it, Hiding in Plain Sight?
Hiding in Plain Sight.
Yeah. And he said it was his wife who, when the night before he almost took his own life, and it was his wife who, when he got home after the midnight shift, said to him, we need to go to counseling. And he said that her saying that as a unit, as a couple, that they were going to do that made all the difference in the world. So that, I think that's hugely important and should not be underrated, what an asset that is that you guys have that available.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that also helps to get our, sometimes it might be just the officer who needs the individual counseling, but coming in as a couple first kind of breaks the ice a little bit and, allows the officer to kind of experience it, and see what it's like. And then they're going to be more likely to then may pursue individual counseling on their own after that shared experience as a couple.
Yeah, and just to know that your spouse is there for you,
there
right?
for you, and you're not alone.
Yeah.
You don't want to be the broken one.
Right.
Sometimes it's hard to actually accept that, and getting help together does help.
Makes a difference. You talked about something, I'm kind of going backwards, but when we were talking about the recruits and how you kind of do field trips, right, to your offices, which are off-site. So I think that helps relieve some of the stigma for sure, because it's not like, why is this person going to get help? Because sadly, that's still something that people do, right? Talk about that like that, or at least there's a perception, I should say, that people do that more. But you also mentioned family night, which Carolyn and I, one of the things, we just don't do this show, but we actually are trying to make some change. And that is something that we brought up, that at a family night for fire recruits, that we want to be able to be there and to talk to the families and to be the voice. And I just want you to hit on that a little more, because it may not be the recruit or the officer who needs help. Being the spouse, because you're a first responder, but you're also the spouse of a first responder. Being the spouse, that comes with a lot too.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's, you make, as spouses, you make so much sacrifice, in your own personal life, whether it's missing out on your loved one at activities, birthday parties, holidays, and all of that, or just having to deal with the consequences of their own behavioral changes or mood changes. It's not easy to be a first responder, spouse, or family member. And so, for us, that's why it just became so important to do that during our family night, because I know that the officers know that we exist, but if we don't go to family night, the family members will never know. It's not like they're sharing our contact information with them. And so that's why we just get them, early on. And, I believe it's been effective, because we have had some calls from, it's the spouse that's calling to schedule an appointment for the couple.
How much easier is it for a family member? I know the fact that I married a firefighter, I think it was easier for me because my dad was a firefighter, so I grew up with it. You married a police officer, your dad was a police officer, you're a police officer. When it is generational, it has to make it easier.
I think so. Yeah, I think it becomes like, that's what you know, right? Mm-hmm. So it doesn't become like any different, right? It's all you know. It's what you grew up with, and so all the whether it's the inappropriate humor, or just
there's none of that in my house.
What are you talking about? Yeah, it's things that you just are always around, and so I think absolutely it makes it a little bit easier. That understanding of each other, definitely. Is helpful as well.
Was that an adjustment for you? You're kind of inappropriate. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, you're inappropriate all the time.
No. But was that an adjustment? Just like that, we've talked about the holidays before, the sleep, the 24 hours at the fire station. Was that a hard adjustment?
It was. It was different for me at first. Yeah. But you get used to it. I think that, their humor is pretty funny. It's a little dark sometimes, but I get it. But no, it was definitely an adjustment. I know that, a lot of times, I would be out and my friends would have their spouses, but mine was on shift. Right. And I just had to deal with that. But over time it gets easier, I think, but yeah, it was an adjustment.
Yeah, I would think so. You said dark humor, and yes, it's the reality of it. First responders do use dark humor. Is that a coping mechanism?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think oftentimes you need that to be able to laugh, after an incident like this, because when you respond to a horrible traumatic incident, you still have to keep working, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think that ability to kind of use humor, even again, while it may be inappropriate at times, I think that absolutely helps to the officer to cope with whatever they may be feeling at that moment.
Mm-hmm. When you went back to school for psychology, did you ever imagine you would be doing what you're doing now at the level and serving the people, and that there would be such a need for this?
No, never ever planned this, never expected it, never thought that I would be now overseeing not only just the police mental health side of things, but even, really focusing on the mental health of our employees, but also the community that we serve. Mm-hmm. That has been just so rewarding for me to be able to use that combined, education experience on both sides to help the community and help our officers better serve the community.
Mm-hmm. Would you encourage more people to go into this field specifically?
Yes, absolutely. I think having again, culturally competent clinicians. I know you probably have, heard that a
That's
lot.
Okay. Say it again, because people may not have heard it, and it's so important.
Mm-hmm. And some people may claim to be culturally competent, but really, what does that mean? Right. So I absolutely encourage. I have actually a couple of my subordinates that work for me now are in school to become clinicians as well. So definitely always encourage them. It's really refreshing to see so much interest from people who truly are passionate about this population.
Explain culturally competent in case someone's watching our show for the first time and they haven't heard us, because Carol and I have both talked about it, what exactly that means.
Right. To be able to have a true understanding of first responder life, right? Not only from the day-to-day, the occupational stressors, but also the family dynamics, the actual, traumatic exposure to things. So it really has somebody that is not only trained in, therapy, like related to depression, anxiety, PTSD, and things that we commonly see in law enforcement and the fire service, but also, again, an understanding of the lifestyle, right? So who better than ones that have lived it, right? But also, family members like yourselves, you know what that's like, so absolutely. And then training, training is always important as well.
That's great. In your experience, what's the best way for first responders to heal from trauma? Would you have any recommendations?
Yeah, that's definitely, it's a loaded question. One, what I could say is that the resilience that should be there before, right? That proactive approach, I think, is key. That's something that we will consistently encourage, because an incident may impact you, but it doesn't have to, destroy you and ruin your life for the rest, destroy your life permanently, right? Or have an impact on your life for the rest of, or your whole career. And so we really encourage all the healthy coping mechanisms beforehand, and then once you are exposed to a traumatic event, is not isolating, talking about that with your significant other, your trusted person, whoever that might be, because we find that the more that you're able to talk about it, the less it kind of stays like that little hamster in your head going around in that wheel. You're able to get it out. Not that your loved one is necessarily going to say or do anything to make it go away, right? But it's, at least you're able to talk a little about it. We obviously discourage some of the unhealthy coping mechanisms,
which are really common in the first responder world.
Yes, it's obviously very common to, engage in substance use, and so we definitely discourage that, particularly after a traumatic event. Exercise, connection with people, doing whatever it is that you enjoy doing, making sure that you really, fill your time after a traumatic incident with those activities, and not, again, isolating and just like kind of vegging out on a couch.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think what you said first is the most important, because often it's not that one traumatic incident. It's been your whole life, right? A buildup of traumatic incidents, even small ones in childhood. So it's taking care of yourself as best you can, especially if you're a first responder, because there could be that one major thing that just pushes you over the edge.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, and staying consistent with it. We're running out of time, but I want to ask this question. As far as Miami-Dade Sheriff's Office has come, and truly, right? You guys have so many fantastic things in place. What's next? What do you, the one thing that you want to see happen next as far as helping the mental health first responders?
Definitely love to see just that expansion of the services, having just more clinicians available so that we can continue to do the proactive measures that I've discussed, to be more present with our officers before they need to seek therapy, expanding our peer support program as well, because ultimately they are the eyes and ears on the ground. They're the ones that are seeing what their their colleagues are responding to, and they see if their brothers and sisters are going through something. And so really expansion of what we are already doing, and just whatever we can do to continue to reduce stigma and just talk about it a little bit more. Right. Everyday conversation about prioritizing one's mental health.
Yeah, conversations like this one.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And when we talk about increasing the resources, of course, that comes with funding and money, which is hard on any level. But it's one of the reasons that we are holding our first big fundraiser coming up on March 10th.
Yes, we're super excited about it. It's going to be at Anthony's Runway 84, March 10th, and we're asking if anybody would like to sponsor us or auction items. We are super excited about this event. It's bringing more funds for First Alarm to help our first responders.
Yeah, to help our first responders and their families. Again, March 10th. Sponsorship opportunities are still available. Tickets are available as well. I think our Instagram handles, my eyes aren't so great these days. That font's really small. But yeah, I think reach out to us via Instagram if you are interested in sponsoring. It's going to be amazing food.
Yes.
Runway 84. If you haven't been able to get a table since the big reopening, this is your opportunity to get a table. Live music. There will be cigar rolling. Most importantly, a room full of first responders and the loved ones of first responders, of course, all in honor of Lieutenant Alex Acosta. So we're so proud of the work that Carolyn has done, and we encourage all of you to help as well. Major, I can't tell you enough how nice this has been to have you with us today.
Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Keep up the good work.
Thanks.
And as a reminder, always here on First Alarm, family first, sound the alarm.
Save a life.
We'll see you next time, guys.
Bye.